Looking at the Coleman beat locator, and this will kind of explain how octave types line up. Now, when you're looking at the bottom note here, which is C, that is the first partial, or the fundamental, as it says right here, the first partial, otherwise known as the fundamental. Now, the first partial, if you were to do a 2-1 octave, the first partial would be the fundamental, and then the second partial of this low note would be the C, being the second partial. In other words, being an octave above. Okay? Which in turn, this C, the fundamental or first partial of this C, would be itself C. So if I tuned a 2-1 octave, I would be tuning this note for both notes. The fundamental of this note tuned to the second partial of this note. And you can actually hear that note inside here. So what I will do is I will hold down the bottom note and then play the top note and have this note, this upper C here, vibrate sympathetically in this bottom string. So here we go. And you can hear that. Okay? If I'm tuning a 2-1 octave, I'll be listening for this note inside of this note and tuning that interval till it is beatless. Okay? Now moving up the scale, if I were to tune, say, a 4-2 octave, I'd be tuning the fourth partial of this note. Okay, so here's the first partial, second partial, the third partial, it would be a fifth above and an octave, and then I would have the fourth, which would be 2 octaves above the original note down here, C. Now, to tune a 4-2 octave, I would be taking the second partial of this note, which would be an octave above its fundamental. Okay, and I would be tuning it to the fourth partial of this note. So if I tuned this octave right here, what I'd be listening for is the fourth partial of this note to line up with the second partial of this note, which would be this note. So I would listen for that inside those other two notes. Okay, so what I will do, you can hear that now. Okay, so I would listen for that partial. Now another partial would be, or another type of octave, which is stretched a little bit more, because all these could be somewhat beatless, but if you stretch the octave a little bit more and listen to a different test or a different partial each time that you do an octave, it stretches it a little bit more. And that's responding to inharmonicity. Since inharmonicity, whenever you make the string shorter or stiffer, it artificially sharpens, sharpens the harmonics. So if on a piano that has a lot of inharmonicity, you want to use a little bit more stretch to get a better sounding octave, then you can do so. Now, another octave that we would use, or is used regularly, is a 6-3 octave. It has a little more stretch than a 2-1 or a 4-2. The 6-3 has to do with the coincidental partial being on the fifth of this octave. So if I'm looking at this, I'd be doing the sixth partial of this, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That would be the sixth partial. I'm looking for that to line up and be in tune with the third partial of this note. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that would be the third partial. You'll notice the pink sheet has 1, 2, 3. So that's how that would line up. Okay, so I am listening for this note inside of this octave. So I will do that. I will push these down, hold the sostenuto pedal, and I'll come up here and activate that note inside of those two strings. And you can hear it. Okay, so if I were to do that, there are different tests to do each one. I mean, there's also a 8/4 octave that is even more stretched. And then there's also a 5/10 octave, which would be, of course, you have the 2 octaves in the third. So there are many ways to align or to tune octaves with their coincidental partials. Coincidental just means that they have partials that line up on same notes. And this card, the beat locator, does a very good job of showing you where those coincidental partials are. The pink one here showing all the partials of the upper note of that octave, and of course the yellow one showing you the partials of the lower note of that octave. And it will also show you where the 10th is. It will show you where your intervals are, and you can actually start looking at the various beats that are created within a temperament octave. And we'll show that in a little bit.